I'm curious, I mean, how you set out a research project like this.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, what considerations go into your thinking, say, prior to a trip to Botswana,
Mm-hmm.
about what you want to ask about, what you want to, what needs this investment? um, Maybe even in the context of who else is doing research and
Yeah.
what your contribution is, or the context of who you are
Mm-hmm.
as a person who has these kinds of publication opportunities
Mm-hmm.
and these kinds of teaching opportunities. How do you think through your research project in a
Sure.
case like that?
Well, I'll be honest. We had done a similar research project in West Africa. So some colleagues and I had looked at 3 cities, Bamako, Mali, Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, and Banjul in the Gambia, and how they dealt with the 2008 global food crisis. And we were really interested in why there was limited social unrest in Bamako, yet there was a lot of social unrest in Abidjan and Banjul, what some people would call food riots. So we were interested in similar types of questions in Botswana. It's, agriculture and food security is an area I do research in as a geographer. So it made sense to look at them there. And as I kind of mentioned in the introduction, there were a couple of interesting twists. First of all, it's a relatively well-off country. It's a middle-income country, yet it imports a huge amount of its food, 90% of its food. So that seemed to present some interesting differences from the norm for an African country. I do think it's interesting. You kind of develop a research plan, okay? You formulate something, you submit it for funding, you're comparing how you think this situation compares to what other people have done in terms of research. And then when you get on the ground and actually do the research, things often change. So I had only been to Botswana once before, okay? So I was primarily going there to teach a study abroad program, and this was kind of a secondary activity. So I didn't know much about the mentality and behavior of farmers in Botswana. So when I initially created the set of questions that we were going to ask to people, I assumed that farmers in Botswana would behave like farmers in other areas of Africa that I had worked with. So we had a whole series of questions about, if the price of one crop goes up, do you make adjustments? And so my anticipation was that if the price of sorghum or maize went up, maybe people would grow more of those crops and they would decrease the area devoted to other crops. And what we found in Botswana is that the vast majority of rural interviewees tend to farm the same area every year, regardless of what the market is doing. So they always, for example, farm 5 hectares of land. Also, Botswana's traditionally men take care of cattle and women farm. So crop farming is very much a female activity. And as agriculture has declined in importance, increasingly most of the farmers in Botswana are literally old women. So there's a labor issue. A lot of older female farmers in Botswana will get grants from the government which allow them to pay somebody to come in and plow their land for them, and then they will sow the seeds. So it's they're farming in a way that kind of minimizes the amount of labor they need to furnish in the farming enterprise. And these are things that, until I started interviewing farmers, I had little to no understanding of. So while I was there, that, my questions evolved as my understanding of farming in Botswana became clearer or more refined.